All right, let's talk about something that can feel, well, a little awkward, maybe even scary for a lot of us, sharing our sexual fantasies. But what if I told you that navigating this one conversation could actually be the key to unlocking a deeper, more profound connection with your partner?
So let me start with a story. A woman named Camilla was in therapy, and she was wrestling with this exact fear. She had this rich, recurring fantasy, but she was terrified to tell her husband. She thought he'd think she was weird. And that feeling, I think that's something so many of us can relate to.
But here's the reality check. What percentage of people do you think actually have sexual fantasies? The answer, from huge studies, is over 95%. Let that sink in for a second. If you have them, you are not weird. You are in the vast, overwhelming majority. It is a completely normal, totally healthy part of being human.
So let's pull back the curtain on this secret inner world, because we need to really understand what fantasies are all about. They are so often wildly misunderstood.
Okay, this is probably the most important thing to get. A fantasy is not a literal to-do list. It's not a sign that you're unhappy or that something's missing. Instead, think of it like a clue, a roadmap to your erotic energy. It points toward the feelings that help you thrive, things like wanting novelty or a sense of surrender or even power. It's about imagination, not a demand for action.
So what about those fantasies that we might label as, kinky or weird? Remember Camilla's fantasy about being tied up? Well, research shows that a staggering 96% of women have had a fantasy that involves some form of BDSM. So once again, what might feel like this strange, isolated thought is actually incredibly common.
And this all leads us to the big question, right? Should you actually share these fantasies with your partner? I mean, is it a requirement for a healthy relationship?
Before you decide for yourself, let's just do a little thought experiment. Start by asking what you expect from your partner. Do you believe you have a right to know every single thought that crosses their mind?
And now let's flip that question inward. Would you feel comfortable with total, unfiltered transparency about your own inner world? Seriously, thinking about both sides of this can tell you a lot about where your personal boundaries are.
Ultimately, there is no single right answer here. It's all a balancing act. Some people really prioritize the security that comes from total openness, while others place a much higher value on privacy and their own independence. It's about finding the balance that feels right for your unique relationship.
And the research totally backs this up. People who share often do it because, well, it's exciting, or because they feel deeply secure in their relationship. But on the flip side, people who keep fantasies private often do it out of fear of being misunderstood, or they just recognize, this fantasy is just for me. And both of those positions are completely valid.
Okay, so let's say you've weighed the pros and cons, and you decide you do want to share. How on earth do you do it without it becoming a total disaster? Let's walk through a clear step-by-step guide.
First things first, you have to just accept the awkwardness. People always ask how to avoid feeling weird, and the secret is, you can't. Leaning into that vulnerability, that's actually the first step. The only way out is through.
Now for the practical stuff. Timing is absolutely everything. Don't spring this on your partner in the heat of the moment. That's not fair. Give them time to really process it. And then open the conversation by stating your vulnerability and your trust in them. When you tell your partner, "I trust you won't judge me," they'll want to live up to that.
This is such a great way to ease into it. Instead of just dropping the whole detailed fantasy at once, you start with the feeling behind it. Remember Camilla? For her, the feeling was about surrendering control. And you should always explain the why. It totally transforms the conversation from, say, "I want to be tied up," to, "I want to explore being tied up because it helps me get out of my head and just feel totally present with you." See the difference?
Now, if that direct approach still feels way too intimidating, don't worry, there are tools that can help. Something called a sexual inventory tool, which is usually a yes, no, maybe so list, can be a fantastic, really low-pressure way to start exploring desires together.
What's so cool about these lists is the huge range of topics they cover. Everything from physical acts to even the specific words you like to use. It lets you and your partner privately mark what you're interested in, and then you just get to see where your yeses and maybes overlap. It creates such a natural and safe starting point for the real conversation.
So, you've had the talk, your partner's on board. What now? How do you actually act on a fantasy without it turning into a complete train wreck?
The most important thing to remember here is the mindset. The goal is not to perfectly recreate some scene from a movie. It's about creating a new, safe experience together where the real focus is on curiosity and connection,
not performance. Honestly, the biggest mistake couples make is going from 0 to 60. Instead, just start with a small slice of the fantasy. If it's about dominance, maybe you just start with verbal commands. And you absolutely need a clear game plan. Talk about hard no's, maybes, and definite yeses. And always have a communication plan like a safe word so you can pause at any time, no questions asked.
And this is so important. The experience doesn't just end when the activity does. You need to plan for aftercare, what you're going to do afterward to reconnect and feel grounded again. And then later, debrief the experience. And this isn't a performance review, okay? It's an emotional check-in. Ask things like, what came up for you? What did you enjoy? This is where the real connection happens.
Going through this whole process, the talking, the planning, the careful exploration, it's about so much more than just spicing things up. There's a real, tangible payoff for your relationship.
The research on this is just overwhelmingly clear. When you openly communicate your needs and your preferences, it is directly linked to higher levels of desire and satisfaction for both of you. It builds trust, it deepens intimacy, and it boosts your overall relationship happiness. Simply put, it's a win across the board.
And that really brings us to the ultimate point here. This journey isn't just about trying new things in bed. As the therapist Emily Jamea puts it, it's about having the courage to reveal your whole self to your partner. And that trust, that vulnerability, that is what turns good sex into something truly extraordinary.
So we want to leave you with this final question to think about. In your relationship, what would it actually look like to feel safe enough to reveal your whole, complete self? And what's maybe one small step you could take to move toward that?